There's a lot of you here today who know Len better than I ever did. But he touched me in a really special way, and I just wanted to share from the perspective of someone who worked for him at a lower level, the box boy, just how it was that he had touched my life. When I was 17 years old, I wanted a job that I would be respected for because I was tired of working at the swap meet and working in the back of a bakery where I never got to see the customers. And so I applied for a job at McDonald's, and they didn't hire me. So I had heard that Noren's Market was just a really respectable place to work, and that the owner there, Mr. Noren, paid his young men well, and that it was just sort of the up-and-coming job for someone who was over 18. So as soon as I was 18, I went down and applied at the store, and the first thing that I remember, Mr. Noren, that's what we called him at the time because I was afraid of him. I kind of stood there behind the, my side of the meat counter, and he kind of came up and wiped his hands off on his apron, and there was blood on there, and I thought, I don't know if I want to be here. And first thing he said to me was, well, now, would you be willing to cut your hair? And I said, Mr. Noren, I'll shave it all off if you want. And he looked at me with this kind of puzzled expression for a second. And he said, no, you don't have to do that. But he said, well, I'll tell you, I don't need any box boys right now, but why don't you come back in a couple weeks and check with us? So someone had told me that that's the way to get a job with Mr. Noren, was to show that you were persistent and a hard worker. So I came back 2 more times, and finally he said, well, all right, I'll give you a try on Saturday. Why don't you come in Saturday morning and report to Darryl? So I came in Saturday, and I spent the next year and a half or 2 years there, what were, I think, some of the most important years of my life. And it was just because of the way that Mr. Noren, and then I got to call him Len after a while, treated his employees and treated his friends. And eventually I was able to work in the meat department as just sort of an assistant cleaning up back there. And he came in one day and he said, here, I want you to hold this. And he handed me $40 in cash. And I said, okay. And I figured he probably had a bet on who Darryl was flirting with or where Greg was in the store. So I held it, and as he walked out the door, he stopped and he turned and he said, I'd just been meaning to do something for you because you're working hard, and I hadn't thought of how, and I just thought this would help out. And he left. And I have never scrubbed on a meat grinder so hard in all my life. And the principle, I found out later on, when I went to work on my bachelor's degree in business, on motivating employees, was nothing he'd learned in a book. And everything I learned at school, and everything I've learned since then on my jobs, is nothing, and he didn't read that stuff. It was just something that was inside of him. And I've never worked harder for anyone in my whole life, and I suspect that I probably never will again. And the reason is because Len made you feel like he loved you. And I'm just really grateful for that. And probably the biggest disappointment to me is just the way I work, and my motivation is that I like to please people. And I especially like to please people that make me feel important to them. And everything I've been doing in the last couple of years, I've been sort of looking forward to coming back to Noren's Market and saying, hey, Len, look what I did. The time that you spent developing my character was not wasted. And I just kind of wanted to show him that my efforts were almost a tribute, in fact, to him and everything he had done. And it was really sad. I had showed up Sunday afternoon at his house to say hello, and he wasn't home. And then I went back to Los Angeles and cooked a chicken dinner with a knife that he had given me for a bunch of people, boning the breasts the way he had taught me, and everyone was very impressed. And then I found out that night that he had passed away, and it made me really angry because I wanted to show him. His name is on the end of the film I did at school this semester, and he had donated some money to help me finish my film because he knew that I was in trouble. And he just meant a lot to me, and his family too. And you can tell a man by his works. And everything about Len, especially his children, Greg and Rhonda. Rhonda was the store psychologist and helped me through First Love and through... Gregor treated me like a little brother, and he was always taking me places and giving me little extra jobs to do and bringing me into his own home. And just their whole family has really been a family away from me. And probably the most impactful moment I can remember about working there is just that when my mother passed away, I was working at the store when they discovered this, and Len was the one that had to tell me. And he came back there and he said, Dave, you just got a call from your dad, and I think you better go home. And I knew what that meant. And I looked at him, and it was just what Barry was talking about, this thing in his eyes, because he didn't talk a whole lot. But there was just this thing in his eyes that just burned right through me. And I turned away from him and I said, thanks, Len, I think I'll just stay. And I kept washing the pans because I didn't want to leave his store. Because with him I was safe and I knew I was loved. And it just was kind of proof to me that Len Noren was a man who really, really knew how to reach out and take care of people. Anyway, thanks, Len.